The Mount Rushmore of MMA is a difficult proposition with only 4 spaces available. A top contender for a guaranteed spot is Canada's Georges St-Pierre. The long-reigning welterweight champion is considered to be one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time and had one of the single biggest impacts on the sport. Though his resume and career is the stuff of legend, GSP's character and conduct made him one of the most respected fighters of all time, whilst being a big star in Canada. This is the story of Georges Rush St-Pierre. George was born in Saint-Isidore, Monterrey in 1981. A large portion of the province of Quebec was made up by fellow French Canadians like St-Pierre, known as Quebecois. Competing in multiple sports in his early years, GSP took up karate at the age of 7 to learn self-defense. He was unfortunately bullied throughout his childhood, and training in martial arts gave him the confidence he needed to get through this period of time. Briefly working as a bouncer and a garbage man, he took his first pro fight at the age of 20, equipped with a full arsenal of martial arts experience. After building a record of 5-0 competing in Quebec, he was signed to the UFC and made his debut in 2004 at UFC 46. With back-to-back UFC wins over Karo Parisien and Jay Heyron, he jumped right into a title shot with Matt Hughes, who would go on to become one of GSP's many great rivals. A competitive opening round ended with Hughes submitting St-Pierre with just 1 second left in the round. A loss in his first title fight would prove to be the making of GSP 2.0, as he embarked on a run that would see him ascend to the top of the sport. After competing in one fight outside of the UFC following his loss to Hughes, GSP returned to the octagon and produced 5 straight wins between 2005 and 2006. Beating a who's who of the division with wins over Jason Miller, Frank Trigg, Sean Shirk, and BJ Penn. He capped off this run with a huge rematch against Matt Hughes. At UFC 65, St-Pierre produced one of his career's best moments, stopping Hughes in the second round after landing a devastating head kick. Despite being known for his run as a 170-pound champion, a huge bump in the road came in his first title defense. By winning the 4th season of The Ultimate Fighter, Matt Serra earned himself a title shot against the newly crowned champion. Producing the biggest upset in UFC history, Serra shocked the world by TKOing St-Pierre in the first round after dropping him with a huge shot. Despite the devastating setback, GSP wouldn't let this loss define his career. Armed with his all-star team from the TriStar Gym in Canada, led by one of the best minds in the sport, Firas Zahabi, GSP started his road back to the belt. At UFC 74, GSP would meet another one of his iconic opponents in Josh Koscheck, defeating him via unanimous decision. With Matt Serra suffering an injury when scheduled to face Matt Hughes in his first title defense, GSP stepped in for a trilogy bout with Hughes. Rounding out their trilogy by winning their last fight, GSP once again finished Hughes in the second round, claiming the interim title in the process. At UFC 83 in Montreal, Quebec, GSP walked out with an army behind him, finally getting his chance to prove that his loss to Serra was as much of a one-off as many believed. St-Pierre put those bad memories to rest by stopping Serra in the second round with some devastating knees to the body. From this point on, it was clear that George was one of the best martial artists on the planet. Arguably the most well-rounded fighter the sport has ever seen, GSP used this to his advantage, giving him paths to victory against every style he came up against. His loss to Matt Serra would prove to be the last of his career, as he embarked on one of the greatest title runs in MMA history. After recapturing the belt from Serra in April of 2008, he would defend the title 6 times by April of 2011, facing a roulette of styles from the grappling prowess of BJ Penn and Jake Shields to the dangerous striking of Dan Hardy and Thiago Alves. GSP simply outclassed his opponents in every aspect of the sport, who arguably didn't win a round against him. With some injuries keeping GSP out for longer than he would have wanted, a rivalry started with the man who would become his arch-rival. In combat sports, a great champion and star needs an equally special dance partner to elevate their careers. In this case, it was Stockton's finest, Nick Diaz. After beating BJ Penn, Diaz produced one of the most legendary callouts in the sport's history, shouting at Georges St-Pierre while he sat in the front row. With his injuries keeping him out of competition, Diaz fought Carlos Condit for the interim title. Diaz ultimately lost the bout via unanimous decision, and Condit went on to give GSP one of the toughest tests of his career, but also came up short to St-Pierre in Montreal. With Diaz and GSP being the fight everyone wanted to see, they were then matched up for UFC 158, despite Diaz losing to Condit. The pair were a perfect contrast to each other in the eyes of viewers. On one hand, you had St-Pierre, the perfect champion, a near-flawless martial artist who conducted himself with grace and tradition. a true student of the game. Nick Diaz, on the other hand, couldn't have been more of a polarizing figure. The build-up featured plenty of tension between the two, and this fight would go on to be the biggest of both of their historic careers. As St-Pierre had made very clear, the fight wasn't very competitive, as Nick's grappling was no match for the takedowns of the champion. Another unanimous decision win in Montreal put him on a streak of 8 consecutive title defenses. Though Georges St-Pierre had dominated most of his opponents up to this point, his next fight would undoubtedly be the toughest test of his championship run. UFC 167 is one of the most controversial events in the sport's history, and is by far GSP's most talked about title defense. Facing American wrestler turned one-punch KO artist Johnny Hendricks, this fight pushed the champion further than anyone had ever managed. Able to stop GSP's takedowns and hurt him badly on his feet with his devastating power, many to this day believe that Hendricks should have gotten his hand raised and been crowned the new champion. Instead, the champion retained the title with a massively controversial split decision. To add even more questions to the event, GSP vacated the title soon after and took an extended hiatus from the sport. With rumors and hopes of a GSP return circulating every few months, fans were always left with what-if questions for years. Almost 4 years to the day since his last fight, St-Pierre returned to the octagon and put these questions to rest. The perfect fight for GSP to return to had finally come around, a shot at the UFC middleweight title against a fellow Hall of Famer Michael Bisping. Serving as the main event for UFC 217 at Madison Square Garden, the event would go down as one of the best cards in UFC history. Coming back at middleweight would allow GSP the opportunity to add another accomplishment to his resume, winning a world title in a second weight division. As had been the case many times before, St-Pierre used his diverse skill set to control the majority of the fight, leading to a rear naked choke finish in the 3rd round. Though GSP would vacate the title soon after and step away from the sport for good, fans had finally gotten what they wanted. Not only did this fight produce a very entertaining build-up thanks to the trash-talking and bravado of Michael Bisping, fans got to experience a GSP fight week once again. It was an event that had all the hype of a legend returning to the octagon after 4 years away. But once that had sunk in, it felt like George had never really left. Though fans will always question if he'll return, UFC 217 was the satisfying end to his legendary career, especially following the UFC 167 controversy. All in all, Georges St-Pierre was a legend of the sport in every way possible. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.